Hey, everybody, welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. And today we are joined by Neil Batra, a friend of ours, Cincinnati improv community. Hey, Neil, how's it going?
Hey, not too bad, not too bad. How you guys doing?
Doing
Doing
okay,
well, man.
man.
Yeah.
Honestly, these conversations, Bob and I have been doing these 4 days a week. We've been trying to do them daily if we can, but this is probably the thing that's keeping me the most sane and like regimented right now is just being able to talk to people in the improv community.
Oh, I feel
completely agree.
Yeah.
Because when we're not talking during these conversations, we're talking about the conversations we're about to have, which is almost as exciting.
Yeah,
You're like,
true.
what can we talk to Neil about? This is gonna be great. It gives you something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So Neil, you're a friend of ours in the Cincinnati community, and you work with OTR Improv, which how long has OTR been around? That's a pretty long-standing group, right?
Yeah, about 10 to 12 years. They started in a box truck, if I remember the history correctly. Yeah, they started improvising out of a truck, and then started working with the No Theater, a local indie theater in Cincinnati, and then just slowly started growing from there. And then maybe about 6-ish years ago, we started the Improv Festival of Cincinnati, and then really expanded from there. And that's around the time, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I auditioned and started learning from them, and got to meet Bob maybe about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Because between the Cincinnati and the Detroit community, you guys come up to the Detroit Improv Festival, and Detroit people come down to Cincinnati for the festival.
Yeah.
So it's a good local, like regional community.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So cool. You are part of the message group that Bob reached out to, looking for questions that would be good topics for this show and for Improv FAQ to discuss.
Yeah.
And the one that we're going to talk about for this episode is silence and stillness. Like, what do you? I think the way the question was phrased in the group chat was, what do you do with silent opportunities or silent moments?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we would mix in also like how useful stillness can be. So those two things are going to be what we talk about for the episode, and we'll see where it takes us. But when it comes to like what made you want to talk about this topic, I guess is where I'll start.
So silence is something that's always been really powerful to me in a scene. Like, we always would do exercises where we would maybe start with the 30 seconds of silence, and then you would be allowed to talk. But what really always got me about silent scenes, even if you started, it's in the middle or it's towards the end, is that you really are exploring communication and emotions, like body language, facial expressions, and spatial and object work, which and it's much more kind of grounded in reality, I'd say, than a lot of, just normal kind of verbal improv. Verbal improv, you can kind of go to the moon and stuff. And, silent, you can kind of just be whisking an egg and really make a powerful kind of communication just by being silent and not talking, and really make a crowd laugh. You can make them cry. You can make them go through a range of emotions, just not even saying anything.
Yeah, I think in general there's what is it? Maybe we can kind of start here too. Is like, what is it about improv that makes it so dialogue driven? I mean, obviously it's like that words are going to be the way that you establish things. For the most part, that's going to be your most clear communicator. But physicality is so. I feel so much more useful, or has so much more oomph to it if you're good at using it. People who are good at using physicality, whether it's for character or environment, that is really probably the most powerful tool to make a show or a scene three-dimensional and most memorable. So yeah, I don't know. I feel how do we get physicality and silence more into improv?
I think that's just a byproduct of how we got started, right? Most of us got started by watching sketch, and sketches mostly, dialogue driven. We started watching SNL when we were kids, Kids in the Hall, you know, all those kind of shows. And then we think that's kind of our job to do when we get on stage. I've said this a lot, like our job isn't to talk throughout the whole scene. Our job is to tell a story. And sometimes you need a dramatic pause to emphasize the story that you're telling. So I don't think we really ground that in fast enough. Plus there's also like most of us, when we start with short form, and that's 100% dialogue.
Yeah, trying to
or you're sorry, or with short form, you're kind of like spurred by the rule of the game. So it's a little bit more driven from the design of the game, as opposed to, you know, you sometimes in free form or in long form, you're less prompted or spurred to do it. Right.
And there's that culture of protect the line, right? You got to get out there and say something. You got to get out there and say something. And then when you get to long form, get out there, but you don't have to say something. Like I'm confused, you know?
Like learning that you can continue a scene without being funny. You can continue a scene with a basic physicality or a strong character that doesn't say anything. It's you know, I found that, it's just more helpful to kind of continue the scene rather than to necessarily be funny in the scene with dialogue.
Yeah. So Neil, what do you think about what to do in those moments? So like, if you have either the opportunity just shows up in the middle of a scene, or you come out and are initiating a scene with object work, like, are you kind of softly in your head, kind of just like figuring out the world that you're engaging in, or are you kind of like just really breathing and almost using it as like a meditative moment to just try to
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So like when so sometimes I don't have an idea as I'm going on stage, and that's, you know, kind of a big fear, but that's, I feel, is a dialogue driven kind of fear, is that you kind of step out there and you have the expectation that you have to say something. But, you know, if you can go out there with a strong character, with a strong physicality, you know, that can be just as great. And so that I can take those 10, 15 seconds, which is a long time on stage, but, you know, you can really establish a character with nothing, with no words.
Yeah.
Well, I think you make a really good point there. And also, like what you said about 15 seconds feels so long on stage.
Yeah.
I think that's a skill that you really got to teach yourself. Like what stage time feels like to you. Cause I've watched myself a couple of times on video after a show, and I thought, oh man, I really let that breathe. And then I watched it, and it was no, you picked right up there. You're like, oh man, it felt forever. So just that took some self-coaching, if you will.
Yeah,
like definitely. It takes a minute.
Yeah. Even like been doing more like self-tape video bits for social media as we're all at home, and I just like improv riffing on with a character or a bit or whatever. The gap between sentences, I'm like, man, I was really kind of like taking my time or having these unnecessary long pauses, and then I'll watch the video back and be like, oh, that barely felt like a hesitation, but you feel it so much more, even that tiny little moment between sentences or parts of a sentence where you're like, oh man, I froze up there. And it's just not how it actually is in reality.
But now it's like one of my favorite tools.
Oh, absolutely.
I love nothing more. Just so because when you start the silence, it's silent. You know, the audience is silent. You're silent. Your scene partner's silent. Everybody's silent, and then it gets uncomfortable. And if you cannot, that's when you know you're comfortable on stage.
Yeah.
Because if you could just sit there and wait for them to become uncomfortable to the point where they start, the tension starts making them laugh. Oh, that's so great. That's such a great feeling. That's one of my favorite laughs. Like, oh, this is really light lifting for me. I just have to sit there and stand still. Like, awesome.
Yeah.
Enjoy this. And then the first thing I'm saying is going to be hilarious because I broke the tension.
Yeah.
And it's not, on paper, not funny. It's just funny because, oh, thank God he's talking again.
Yeah, that's a great point because both silence and stillness are tension building devices. If even if you're not using it that way intentionally or consciously, that's what's happening, is that you're building tension, and then that gets broken by whatever comes next. But that's where a lot of comedy comes from, is building tension and breaking it.
Yeah.
So it's useful just in general as like a built-in comedy device.
Yeah. I mean, same.
Then it's also that. Oh no!
Go ahead.
Neil, what?
I mean, same can like be said for like real life, tense moments, and then just kind of really broken like by like a really loud fart, an extremely kind of just funny, it's a really tense moment, and then just someone rips one, and then you just can't stop laughing because it's a tense moment that's broken by something funny or just the first thing that's
the most absurd thing to do. Yeah,
exactly. It's hysterical.
Yeah. Neil, how do you so if somebody's looking for advice on how to get more comfortable with silent moments or still moments, being somebody that's comfortable with it, how do you give advice to people who aren't on how to get more comfortable?
So, I mean, it starts with basic exercises, like if you have a scene partner or a team that you're working with, just exercise. I like the 30 seconds of silence exercise. And then you just exist. You bring your characters with your emotions and your physicalities. And then, someone can say at the end of 30 seconds, like it's time, or you kind of just let them go. And then just kind of see how the scene continues. And then you just kind of, it's repetitive. It's practice for me. And that's how I got comfortable with it. And then, if you have the opportunity to like do it on stage, just again, start a scene with silence and see where it goes with your scene partners, and then just eventually break it. But to me, it's a lot of practice with it. And just getting comfortable with those tense moments, those tense scenes, and then just kind of get comfortable breaking it if you feel like it.
Yeah. I think you make a good point. It's like you have to realize you're in control.
Yeah.
Because I think at first when we first stumble on to being silent, we don't feel in control. So it's learning how to have that control and then using it.
Yeah. I also took like a few great workshops. Isaac Kessler from Two Man No Show, like his clown workshop. Chad and Juzo from Jetso, like some of their shows are like, like heavily rely on like kind of silent movements and things like that. I really like enjoy that kind of physicality, like, just big movements, big characters, and they're silent and they really excel at it.
Yeah. It's funny. We talk about Two Man No Show. Like it seems like every other conversation, because they're something else. The way that they use physicality or nonverbal elements. Yeah. Are there shows in particular, or troops or scenes that would that come to mind as an example for your own experience, Neil, that like that you can kind of point to as like that was a great example of how silence worked for me? Or that you get the most opportunities to exercise it? Yeah,
I can think of two off the top of my head. I can't remember the team name specifically, but like it's like a 15-minute set, and they're kind of, the backdrop is music, but they don't speak the entire time. And I can find it and get that information to you later. But literally, like it's crazy funny where they just do not speak the entire time. It's set to this kind of musical, magical backdrop. And like, I remember, so it's two people, like, she kind of opens the window and he throws her something and she picks it up and she makes it a can, like a tin can that, is attached to a string, and then they can kind of contact. It's nonverbal, but they're still like contacting each other through like this silly little string phone. And another one, it's more of a personal one. I remember in a scene with my partner, they were talking and I wasn't. But like I was like, rolling, I was like using a rolling pin, like if I were in a bakery or something, and they were saying, hey, I saw, your ex. And I started like rolling my pin faster. I'm like, uh-oh, like, what do you know? Do you know something that's going on? And then they're like, oh, they were across the street, so I couldn't really talk to them. And then I slow back down. And I'm like, oh, good. Oh, good. And then they're like, oh, but then I saw them at the bank, and then like I start like rolling really fast again. I'm like, oh crap, oh crap. They like kind of know that I'm doing something with them. So again, it just, you know, you can change yourself based on what they're doing.
So, man, yeah, I'm always kind of trying to figure out what the difference between being productively in your head versus like being there in a negative spot, because that to me, where you're like you're listening and you're purposefully changing your behavior, is like it's a great use of nonverbal. And I'm just kind of like wondering like uh what how do you make sure or recognize the difference? Like before you were more comfortable with it, Neil, would you get more into your head after a couple beats of silence?
Definitely.
And so it's not like you're having nothing but white noise in those moments. You're listening and you're doing things on purpose. So like I don't know, like it's such an interesting thing to me that like when you're doing things consciously but comfortably, or when being conscious of what you're doing becomes being in your head.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that again, it took some time to kind of get used to, just like being comfortable in the silence, being okay with no one speaking. It just like, yeah, in the beginning, like I would probably feel like I would have to maybe be more erratic or like even break the silence sooner, which is something that now I can just continue to go longer without. But yeah, like kind of just being in your head kind of forces you to act differently, you know, kind of changes the scene in a way, rather than just, again, like, you know, continuing the scene rather than having to like necessarily be funny. But it's so important to just kind of continue that scene rather than kind of shift it in a way because you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Plus, I think also what initiates the silence is important in those moments. Like, are you initiating silence because you have nothing? Are you initiating silence because you and your scene part, or the character your scene partner is playing, or your character and your scene partner's character just had a big argument, so now you shut down,
Yeah.
And the next thing you're going to say is going to be angry, or maybe you're going to have a moment of reflection. Yeah, I think that's kind of important too. And also, are you being silent and still, or are you using your face to be the voice of the audience? Like, are you reacting? Like, are you that third person in the scene who just happens to be on the bench while these two are talking about their plans to rob a bank? You know, I think that those are factors to put in there too.
Yeah. Intention is definitely important. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that one example that comes to mind for me is there was a set that we were doing, I think for like Teachers Lounge. It was a bunch of the teachers at the end of a class show, and I stepped out on stage, and somebody on the back line started making an alarm noise, and I just I was like panic, and then started running around flipping levers and pushing buttons and stuff. And it must have lasted for like a couple minutes, and then I finally like climbed up a ladder or something. But it was just a bunch of running around and object work, like flipping switches and environment work. So it was very frenetic, but like I knew I was free and wasn't thinking, oh man, what's going on? I didn't know, like, oh, am I like in a bunker or a nuclear silo, or I didn't know exactly what the full context was, but I just knew the simple fact that like alarm's going off and I've got to flip these switches, period.
I don't think I was there, but I could see the scene in my head, just knowing the way you play, like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good one. I want to see that.
Yeah. But yeah, there's that intention behind that, or knowing your mission, your simple thing in the moment. Versus like Pete and I tried doing a silent show, and part of there were like these vignettes, just like 5 or 8 minute segments of the show that we did improvised. We had music play, and we tried to do improvised segments, and we were just. I think it was funny, but we were like working pretty hard, or at least that's how I felt. And you know, I think if I had to do it over again, I would start with more like relaxed, breath. You know, just like take a moment to just chill. Because I love the opportunity to be frenetic and in a panic. I love being very active. But you can't force it, right? Like you've got to work your way up to it, or really be inspired to it.
And I think
do you ever try? Do you ever just take like a big? You guys ever take like just a big leap and start acting crazy in those silent moments?
I have in the past. Like, I mean, I like if I hear kind of a bird noise or something, like I might start out like with a crazy big bird character again, and we don't know where we're going with it. We're just kind of flying. We're flapping our arms really hard, probably too hard to like continue for 5 minutes, but it's something that, you know, it's necessary and it's so much fun. But like, yeah, I like to kind of start grounded and then kind of escalate from there.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that scene I did in Cincinnati with Dave, and I don't remember who his scene partner was. But I got to jump in with the set with at the No Theater, and Dave Powell and his scene partner were 2 librarians, and they were kind of arguing over the intercom.
I remember that.
Library's closing.
I do remember
It's kind of like that bit from Airplane where the people over the announcement, like, the parking is for the white zone. No, you idiot. Parking is in the yellow zone. So they're kind of doing that.
Yeah.
And it was really funny.
You had a little backpack, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a visual element to it, so I jumped in, and I was just like, to me, I was simple. Like, there's got to be a kid in here. You know, it's almost like that awkward tension you have with your parents when they argue. Yeah. So I start putting on my backpack, and they're arguing. So I look up as if there was a speaker above me, and then that's all I had. And from then, like, I just had to keep on reacting bigger and bigger. So I found myself doing something more physical and physical. By the time I was done, I was slitting my wrist and doing a bunch of crazy stuff. And it was wild because I had no idea what I was doing or what I was going to do when I jumped in there. And it's that one of those pure moments, like, well, I guess I'm in the scene now, because I just really thought I was just going to do a one and done like reaction and walk off, but nope, they wouldn't let me go.
No,
it was fun.
Yeah,
I remember you doing this, and I don't know. Hopefully, this is helpful as examples that we're describing, and not just rehashing scenes that we've been part of, but. I remember watching you, I think with Vulcan Hipsters, one of the Go House teams. You went out alone, Bob, and you were washing your hands. And Eric Heilner on the back line makes a PA noise and goes like, paging Dr. Johnson to the OR. And you go, and keep washing your hands, and then Eric, after a couple beats, pages again and goes, boop. Dr. Johnson, never mind. And you go.
That's horrible. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's very dark, but like regardless, it's there's so much that you're communicating with little, like that was pretty subtle. It wasn't like big overt. It was just you like, and maybe we can talk about this is that you communicated so much in that, and it was so funny, and I think in part because it was more subtle and realistic. When I work with people on physicality, I try to, one of the things that I try to point out is that like being physical doesn't always mean being active, and that there's kind of two modes of physicality or in performance in general that I separate, which is realism and then kind of like two-dimensional cartoony stuff. And I love to play in cartoony world, and I feel like I really thrive there when I'm into it. But there's the more grounded, realistic stuff is just as powerful. You just have to know that you don't have to do anything extra. We are used to reading each other's nonverbals. It's like how we survive and communicate and socialize. So like there's a lot that you're broadcasting even when you think that you're not. You don't have to put that extra stuff on there. Do you guys does that vibe with you guys? Do you try to like, how do you get people who are doing extra in silent moments or initiations to like dial it back and live in their own skin instead of putting on stuff?
Well, that's a good question.
That is a really good question.
Because it's clown stuff. Really, that's like Isaac, you know, like breathing and being you. The clown is about problem solving, and like you have you as a person going through the problem solving steps is theater. Like, so like if you set yourself up with a problem and just really commit to it, like there's a whole different world of like really you feeling that and expressing the things that you express versus like, you know, putting it on. But I've
known in the past, I think at Go during the class show, during one of the short form levels, the students have to do an onion. So you start with one person and then another person is added. So that's two people, and that's a separate scene. And then a third person joins, and that third scene is a different, and you build this onion up, you know, so on and so forth. And at the end, you start removing. So if you have 8 people, when that 8 person left, you go back to the 7th scenes, which you established earlier, and until you get down to 1, and that's the ending of the show. I usually try to cast that with somebody who, I don't know, there's many reasons, but a lot of the time is because I think it's someone who's jokey or has issues with pausing or give and take. And I tell them, when it gets down to you, wait, you know, count to 10, count to 20. If you can hold on to that long and just say something true, not something funny. And I guarantee you get a laugh. And it has worked 100% of the time.
That is fantastic.
And I hope they walk away with the lesson like, oh, I don't have to be jokey to get a laugh. I can use this other element. So I think that's like to initiate that's like my first thing I would do with somebody.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Then I think, again, it's one of those productive ways of being sort of in your head where you are kind of tempering your knee-jerk reaction to just start saying stuff and instead just count to 20. I mean, that's like meditative.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's just like just count for a little bit. And I love that simple line there, Bob, of say something true, don't say something funny. I guarantee you'll get a laugh.
Yeah, like, because you can be like, what can you be doing in 10 to 20 seconds? You can be folding your laundry, and then at the end of it, it's like, I hate folding laundry, and that's all you have to say, and it's true to the scene, and that's all you have to say, and that's what you can be doing in 20 seconds, and it's just like, wow, that's so powerful.
And that game is built perfectly for it because they have to initiate a one-person scene. Yeah. And I usually establish some object work. You know, establish where you are, you know, or who you are if you can, you know, if you could do an occupation of some sort. Yeah. So they're focusing on that. And then the whole game is just, you know, it's usually like a level 3. So everybody's still excited to be on stage. So it's a lot of talking. And then it starts slowing down. And then it takes this long pause. And then everybody's, you know, leaning in because they're waiting for something to be said. And it's something, you just make a great observation. If you just say a truth about yourself or your character, bam, there you go. It's yeah. Instant laugh. Not that that should be the goal, but you know, but you do want one when you're a student. You know?
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, we all want it. It's like
that's why we're improvisers.
it's how to get it at, like, incidentally and in a way that like is that doesn't feel so anxietizing, right? It's like I feel like there is a way to get really good at like working the comedy button, but like it's stressful. It's kind of what I was talking about, like with Pete, is that like I feel like when we did that silent show that we got laughs or like I think the show went fine, but I think that you know, I know I felt like we were really working hard for it, and good for us in the sense that, like, well, you know, we got a couple laughs out of the audience to make sure that they got what they came for a show or the comedy. But there's probably another way that if we were to get another chance at it, that we would get bigger laughs or more laughs without feeling so stressed about it. And maybe Pete would feel entirely differently, but you know.
Well, yeah, speaking of Pete, like that, I think that was something also helpful too, because he did that show Silent, and then him and PJ did Silent 2, which were both all silent shows. And I thought it was hard. Like, I thought it was hard enough for him to do an all silent show, but it was really entertaining. And then to have to do it with, you know, a duo, like I thought that was just like going to be the impossible task. And man, they crushed it. So it was, you know, entertaining and educational. I mean, going back to the other reason why we should go to the theater when we're a student, like to see how other people do stuff, you know, and to learn new elements of storytelling. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because in trying to find those examples, it's easier with dialogue. You can read it, you can hear it. It's easier to communicate and find examples of that stuff when you're looking for it. But the physical nonverbal stuff, to have its full effect and really see the example, you got to go be part of it, because those moments don't translate as well if you're not in the room, because
it relies on tension.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's an energy. You're like, that technique relies on your energy, and it's hard to build that unless you have, like, I don't know, musical accompaniment or something like that.
Yeah,
it's really hard to do, you know. So I think that's why we don't see a lot of examples of that.
Yeah,
except for in clowning, there's, you know, I think there's some great stuff.
Yeah, it'd be like great to like kind of explore, like you said, other types of theater, like clowning, like short form, long form, just like explore a theater, just explore as much as you kind of can and see, you know, like, you know, the first 10 minutes of Up, you know, you kind of get you kind of get the whole gist of like his life in 10 minutes, and it's silent, you know, but you kind of see what they're going through, you see the emotions, you see the tension, and then bam, you're like kind of at the end, you're at the beginning of the movie, but you're kind of at the end of his life, and it's completely silent, but you get the whole story, you know?
Yeah. Neil, how do you, is there like the main thing that you go to in a moment of silence? Are you looking to connect with your scene partner? Are you looking to like, just live in the skin of your character or the moment? Or are you looking to do like object work? Or like, how do you use those things differently?
So it kind of depends, you know, like it depends on my scene partner. Like sometimes like we'll kind of explore the symmetries between us, and then they're like, well, yeah, kind of like seek symmetries between us, like kind of do the same motions, and then explore the kind of asymmetries between us, and then kind of just like go through repetition, and then kind of restart. That's kind of like what I found is like sort of useful, like that I wrote down, I think from Dave, you know, it's just like kind of see what you guys can do similarly, and then explore what you guys are doing differently. Yeah. And then just keep repeating it. And then it kind of can get funnier and funnier, and just kind of continue the scene.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and that's everything, right? I think finding um, finding a consistency and then finding contrast.
Yeah.
To play with, like that's exactly yes and to if then it's base reality, it's who what where.
Yeah.
That's and with physicality or connecting, I love the idea of mirroring until you're like, okay, this is where we're starting.
Yeah.
And then let's kind of see how we're going to deviate.
Yeah.
That's cool. What? So, sorry, but what about for like your own devices? Like if you don't have a partner to mirror or connect with, how do you use like posture or physical characterization and object work differently, or how do you use them together? Either way.
So, I mean, if I'm in a silent scene, yeah, and if I'm by myself, I'll kind of try to like rely upon stuff that I normally do by myself anyways, like doing the laundry, doing the dishes, kind of think about, my posture, kind of like how I'm doing that. I like kind of really reflect on like, if I'm carrying my cat, like, am I like, what kind of position am I holding him? How, like, am I normally slumped? Am I like kind of giving him kisses? Like, what am I kind of doing in my real life that I can kind of reflect on the stage?
Yeah. And I like what you said earlier about how, moments of silence and physicality, just not taking away the verbal element, gives you reality more. Because whether it's closer to your real life, like the things that you do at home or in your regular routine, or even if it is something a little bit more, whatever, it's unfamiliar, a sword fight or a character that's totally different, it gets you committed to what you're doing, as if it's reality, because you're physically engaging it.
There was this one scene that I did with my team, where we were pallbearers, at a funeral, something that none of us have ever done before. And we kind of just, and it's again completely nonverbal. The only people that are kind of speaking are the people that are in the back line, that they're like at the funeral, someone's a priest, but like we're carrying it. And, something that, you've never done. And so I slip and I fall. And so the body kind of falls out of the casket, but it's just, something, you kind of invent a physicality that you haven't used before because you've never done it before. So it kind of just heightens that own experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you approach the unfamiliar? Like you just kind of start grasping at straws, or like you use the fact that you don't know, like
yeah, I kind of use the fact that I don't know when I think about like what can go wrong, how can I like, like I'm heightening the scene by kind of like experiencing the unfamiliar of it, because I know I've seen plenty of movies and I've heard of people dropping the casket. It's a heavy object that you're carrying, so like it's unfamiliar to me, but like a realistic scenario is slipping like on some wet mud or being too heavy for you, so it kind of falls under the weight of your shoulder and you kind of go from there. But it's like you kind of explore the unfamiliarity of the situation.
I like that, like playing from a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
Because if you're curious, like what would happen if, or what would this be like, just really exploring that. Because I think that really draws an audience in. Because if you're asking what if, they might be asking what if, or what are you what ifing? Like it becomes layered. It's kind of like taking a small child for a walk, and they stop and look at the grass, and you're like, what? I don't see anything. I've walked this sidewalk 1,000 times.
Yeah.
What could possibly be interested? So you look at it and they point at something and you're like, oh, cool rock, man.
Yeah. Like, what do you see that I don't see?
Yeah. Guess what? It is a cool rock.
It's actually a pretty cool rock.
I've never noticed that rock before, but wow, it's got a cool shape.
Has it always been there?
Yeah.
That is a great analogy though, because it is about examination and so not only from coming at something that you're not familiar with and being curious about it, but like you get more examination with less, whether that's like fewer words in the dialogue to get the point home, or if once you take all that stuff away, there's actually, I think, more to notice or examine in those silent or still moments than when you're very dialogue verbal driven.
You're silent, you're thinking, like what goes on at a funeral, like, you don't, because like, with verbal, like, you're chatting right through it, you're not really like, you are thinking like at the same time what, and like you can bring it in, but like with the silence, it really kind of like you can heighten it while thinking about it, just thinking about it, and then just kind of go out and just really change the scene, just like because you're thinking about it,
Yeah. So I guess maybe the other thing that I'll throw out there is just dynamics. I mean, we talked a little bit about tension building, but like silence and stillness are just a really good tool for keeping things, a variety of energies in the show.
Okay, pacing.
Or in a scene. Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about group games and solo moments and having, times when the whole cast or just one person is on stage. And I think that same goes with these silent and still moments is that contrast. It helps highlight the loud and high movement parts if you have the silent and still parts too. Do you guys consciously look for opportunities to try to get silence and stillness in there?
Yeah, because I do think of pacing. If you think of scenes as the micro and the set as the macro, if I notice like, oh my gosh, like these last 3 scenes have been really quick or just like manic, time to pump the brakes. So not only like speed or pace or, in that aspect of a scene, I might want to slow down, but also like, I don't know, the tone as far as, okay, well, why were these scenes that the previous scenes so fast? Was it because they were argument scenes, or was it, some kind of stakes that, would get your adrenaline up? Can we slow down the pace? Can we make it an awe moment? And I think Neil mentioned before, like a great way to get, the audience curious and almost on your side and almost really pay more attention to the emotional aspect of it is creating silence, because they're curious as to how you're feeling or what's going on. And I think those are questions that lead to more emotional stakes than I don't know, dialogue-driven stakes.
It's fair. And like kind of build on top of that, you can kind of create similar aspects of like the manic or the conflict scenes with just silence. And they can be so much more powerful with just the silence, just with facial expression, just with like body movements. They can be that much more powerful to watch with creating the silence.
Yeah. And I suppose my last thought on it in all that is that it's a good reminder, a thing to keep in mind, that making active kinetic choices is always going to overpower or override. You can't. It's hard to compete silence against active or noisy choices. If you're in a group with 6 people and 1 or 2 of them likes to play silent and still, quieter moments, and the other 4 people are rowdy, then it's really, you can disrupt silence and stillness a lot more than the other way around. Because even if you're in a group of 10 people and there's like 1 or 2 people that like to play fast and rowdy, those 2 people can disrupt silence and stillness a lot more than if there's a smaller amount of people, in the reverse scenario. So it's good to look for those opportunities, and especially if you recognize that you're playing with people that like to do that, to yes and their that style, because not making a crazy character entrance or rushing into dialogue is so much more, I think, rare and advanced and powerful to do on purpose when the whole group chooses to play a silent or still moment. And it's pretty cool when it happens.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what you said, like, and there is also an approach like, okay, if you're in a 10-person group, these two performers like to go out there and get wacky. Oh, but let them have 2 scenes, and then let them have a scene together, and then jump in after. Like, like, all right, well, they just got out. They let them breathe, let the audience breathe, let everybody breathe. I'm gonna initiate with some silence, and hopefully it's such a strong, the tension in the room is strong enough for them to get what's going on. But hopefully by now everybody gets it,
Yeah. It's a matter of balance, and it's about keeping in mind which style has more weight in that balance.
Right.
Any closing thoughts on it, Neil?
The only thing that I was thinking of is, responding like to a scene with like 2 really rowdy people with silence can just be really awkward. Like, that's the only thing I was thinking of. Yeah. Like, rather than the other way around. Yeah. Like, responding with words, like, kind of like tears the scene up, but like responding to that with silence is just not gonna play as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well then we'll wrap it up here. And Neil, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank
you. It was
you.
really great to
This is a blast,
shop.
guys. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you, and it was a blast to. I just love. It's funny when you, again, by contrast, I'm so used to having so many opportunities to talk shop, and now having fewer of them. It's just bubbled up. So I appreciate being able to talk with you, especially at distance, and glad that you're doing well, and stay sane, stay safe.
You guys do the same. Yeah, it's so great to talk to you guys. Yeah, you're welcome.
Catch you later.
Good seeing you, man.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.